My parents thought they could use my past to blackmail me forever, so I flipped the script and used it to destroy them. When I was a junior in high school, my physics teacher impregnated me. He had me convinced we were in love, that we would travel the world, but the day I came to him with the 2 pink lines, he left the school and never came back. And my parents, well, they took a $100,000 settlement off the school in exchange for signing a contract, stating I was prohibited from going public with this information. Fast forward 9 years. I was working as a nurse during the day and cleaning offices at night to keep my head above water. Every month, I handed over nearly half my paycheck to my parents, who claimed they couldn't survive on their pensions, rent, utilities, groceries, medical copays, the works. Meanwhile, I was skipping meals so my 8-year-old daughter Emma could eat. Speaking of Emma, she got sick, really sick. The doctor said she had an aggressive form of leukemia that required immediate treatment. The medication alone was going to cost thousands every month, and that was with insurance. I went to my parents and explained the situation. I asked if they could just temporarily reduce what I was giving them so I could afford Emma's treatment. That's when they dropped the bomb. They sat me down in their living room with these cold, calculating expressions and told me that if I reduced their support by even $1, they would tell Emma and the entire extended family about her father. They would expose everything about what happened to me in high school. They said they had protected my reputation as a W word for years, and I owed them for that silence. I completely broke down. The thought of Emma finding out that her father was my teacher who abandoned us was unbearable. In my family, if people found out I had been manipulated and used as a teenager, I would be shamed and maybe even excommunicated. So I took out payday loans. I maxed out credit cards. I borrowed against my car. Anything to keep paying my parents while trying to afford Emma's treatment. But it wasn't enough. Emma's condition started getting worse because I had to delay some of her medications. She was missing school constantly and losing weight. I was working 80 hours a week and barely sleeping. My parents kept demanding more money, claiming their costs were increasing. They even wanted me to take a second mortgage on my house. One night, Emma collapsed at school and had to be hospitalized. While I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, a social worker started asking questions about why Emma's treatment had been inconsistent. I was so exhausted and stressed that I almost broke down right there. That's when I found the receipts. I had borrowed my parents' car to drive to the hospital because mine broke down. And when I was cleaning out some trash, I found restaurant receipts from expensive places, casino parking stubs, movie tickets, all from the past month when they claimed they could barely afford food. I started investigating. I followed them one afternoon and watched them walk into a casino. I documented everything. The gambling, the shopping trips. They were living it up on my money while my daughter was dying. But when I confronted them with the evidence, they didn't even try to deny it. Instead, they doubled down on the blackmail. They threatened to call child services and report me as an unfit mother. They said they would destroy my nursing license by claiming I was unstable. They demanded I sign over the deed to my house or they would ruin me completely. That's when something snapped inside me. I realized they had been systematically destroying my life for years. They had taken money that was meant to compensate for my trauma and used it to fund their lifestyle. Then they spent nearly a decade exploiting that same trauma to control me. So I started recording our conversations. I gathered all the evidence of their financial abuse. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I became a professional internet sleuth and learned that what they were doing to me was actually illegal. Financial exploitation, extortion, the whole thing. Then I called a family meeting. I invited all my aunts, uncles, and cousins, everyone who had spent years praising my parents for being such generous grandparents while judging me for accepting their help. And at this family meeting, I played the recordings. I showed the receipts. I explained how they had been stealing money meant for Emma's cancer treatment to fund their gambling addiction. And then I told them the truth about the school settlement, how my parents had been paid $100,000 to keep quiet about a teacher who assaulted their daughter, money they had hidden and spent while forcing that same daughter to work herself into the ground to support them. The room went completely silent. My Aunt Beverly was the first to speak. She just kept shaking her head and saying no over and over. My Uncle Kenneth stood up and walked out without a word. My cousin Lisa started crying. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then my mom started talking. She said I was lying. She said I was having a mental breakdown from the stress. She told everyone I had been acting erratic lately and making up stories. My dad backed her up immediately. He said they had been worried about me for months. He claimed I had been neglecting Emma and they were considering calling child services themselves. I pulled out my phone and played another recording. It was from just 2 days ago when they threatened to destroy my nursing license. My mom's voice was crystal clear, telling me I better keep paying or she would make sure I never worked in healthcare again. But even with the evidence right there, some of my relatives started looking at me differently. My Aunt Teresa said maybe I was just stressed and misunderstanding things. My Uncle Russell suggested we all take a break and talk about this later. I could see it happening. Years of my parents being the perfect grandparents were working against me. They had built up so much goodwill while I was always the struggling single mom who needed help. My cousin Jordan was the only one who seemed to believe me completely. She came over and put her hand on my shoulder. She whispered that she had always wondered where my parents got their money, but most of the family was already starting to side with my parents. They were too shocked to process what I was telling them, or maybe they just didn't want to believe it. My mom started crying then, big dramatic tears. She said she couldn't believe her own daughter would attack her like this. She said all they had ever done was try to help me. My dad put his arm around her and glared at me. He said I was ungrateful and disturbed. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Half the family left without saying goodbye to me. The other half mumbled about needing time to think. Only Jordan stayed behind. She said she believed me and would help however she could, but I could tell even she was overwhelmed by everything. I went home that night feeling worse than before. I had hoped the truth would set me free, but instead it seemed like I had just made everything worse. Emma was still in the hospital. I still had no money for her treatment, and now my parents were going to retaliate. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I got a call from my supervisor at the hospital. She said they had received a concerning report about me. Someone had called claiming I was stealing medications and showing signs of mental instability. I knew immediately it was my parents. My supervisor said I would need to take a leave of absence while they investigated. Just like that, my main source of income was gone. I tried to explain, but she said it was protocol. Any accusations had to be investigated. She seemed sympathetic, but her hands were tied. I hung up and just sat there in shock. Without my nursing job, I couldn't even afford our rent, let alone Emma's treatment. I called the cleaning company to see if I could pick up more shifts, but they said they were fully staffed. I spent the rest of the day applying for jobs online, but I knew it was pointless. Any background check would show I was under investigation at my previous employer. My parents had played their cards cards perfectly. That afternoon, I went to visit Emma at the hospital. She looked so small in that bed. She asked when she could come home. I told her soon and tried not to cry. The doctor pulled me aside and said they needed to discuss her treatment plan. He said the delays were causing complications. He asked if there were financial issues they should know about. I wanted to tell him everything, but I just nodded and said I would figure it out. On my way out, I ran into my parents in the hospital lobby. They were there visiting Emma, playing the role of concerned grandparents. My mom smiled at me coldly. She asked if I had reconsidered their offer about the house. I didn't answer. I just walked past them and out to my car. But I could hear my dad telling a nurse how worried they were about me, how I seemed to be falling apart under the stress. They were already laying the groundwork to make me look unstable. That night, Jordan called. She said she had been thinking and wanted to help. She offered to lend me some money, but I knew she didn't have much. She was a single mom too, working as a teacher. I thanked her but said no, this wasn't her fight. But she insisted on helping somehow. She said she had started going through old family photos and documents. She thought maybe she could find something to support my story. I didn't have much hope, but I appreciated her trying. The next few days were a blur. I sold everything I could. My jewelry, my TV, some furniture. It wasn't nearly enough. Emma needed to start her next round of treatment immediately, but I couldn't afford it. I went to the hospital billing department and begged for more time. They set up a payment plan, but said treatment couldn't continue without at least a partial payment upfront. I had no choice. I went back to my parents. I found them at home, sitting in their living room like nothing had happened. I told them Emma would die without treatment. I said I would do whatever they wanted. Just please let me use some money for her medical bills. My mom looked at me with such satisfaction. She said they had been thinking about my situation. She said they would help with Emma's treatment, but only if I publicly apologized to the family for lying about them. And I had to sign over my house to them immediately. The house was all Emma and I had. It was our security. But what choice did I have? I agreed to their terms. My dad pulled out paperwork he had already prepared. As I signed, my mom called several relatives on speakerphone. She made me apologize for my breakdown at the family meeting. She made me say I had been confused and stressed, that I had made up terrible lies about my loving parents. Each word felt like poison in my mouth, but I said them all. For Emma. After I finished humiliating myself, they gave me a check, just enough for one treatment. They said I would get more after I moved out of the house. They wanted me out within 30 days. I took the check and left. I paid the hospital that afternoon and Emma got her treatment that evening. But I knew this was just the beginning. My parents had won this round. They had turned most of the family against me, cost me my job, and now they were taking my home. But at least Emma would live. That's all that mattered. Jordan called that night excited. She said she had found something interesting in old family files. She wanted to meet in person to show me. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop. I didn't dare hope, but maybe she had found something that could help. Maybe there was still a way to fight back. But I knew my parents wouldn't stop. They had too much to lose now. They had shown their true colors, and they would do anything to keep their secret. The war between us had only just begun. I met Jordan at the coffee shop the next morning. The place was nearly empty. Just a few early risers hunched over their laptops. She had a manila folder stuffed with papers clutched against her chest like a shield. Her eyes darted around the room, checking each face before settling on mine. She slid into the booth across from me, keeping her voice low as she pushed the folder across the scratched wooden table. Inside were bank statements from years ago. The paper yellowed at the edges, but the numbers still clear. My parents' bank statements from right after the settlement. Jordan explained in hushed tones how she'd found them in her mom's attic while helping clean out old boxes. Apparently, my Aunt Beverly had helped my parents with their taxes that year, back when everyone still trusted them. The statements showed the $100,000 deposit clearly, dated just 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. But more importantly, they showed where the money went. Within 6 months, almost all of it was gone. Gambling withdrawals at the casino 40 miles away, shopping sprees at high-end department stores, a luxury cruise to the Caribbean. They had blown through my settlement money before I even graduated high school. I stared at the papers, feeling sick to my stomach. The coffee I'd ordered sat untouched, growing cold as I traced the transactions with my finger. All these years, they made me feel guilty for needing help, calling me ungrateful when I struggled to pay bills. But they had spent money that was supposed to be for my future, for my trauma, for the therapy I never got, and the education I had to put on hold. Jordan said there was more. She pulled out another document, handling it carefully like evidence in a crime scene. It was a letter from the school's lawyer to my parents, the official letterhead still crisp despite the years. It outlined the settlement terms in clear legal language. The money was specifically designated for my care, education, and future needs. My parents had violated the agreement by spending it on themselves. I took pictures of everything with my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I tried to get clear shots in the dim coffee shop lighting. Finally, I had real proof, not just of their current extortion, but of their original betrayal. Jordan said she would keep the originals safe in a safety deposit box her mom didn't know about. She also mentioned that her mom Beverly was starting to have doubts about my parents' story. Apparently, Beverly had noticed some inconsistencies in what they were saying. Small things like dates that didn't match up and bills they claimed to have that didn't exist. They were adding up. I thanked Jordan and headed home to pack, my mind racing with this new information. I had less than 30 days to find a new place for Emma and me, and the rental market in our area was brutal. But first, I needed to figure out how to use this new information strategically. I couldn't just call another family meeting. My parents had already poisoned that well, turning most of the relatives against me with their lies. I needed a different approach, something they wouldn't see coming. That afternoon, I got a call from the hospital billing department. The woman on the phone sounded apologetic but firm. They said there had been an issue with the check my parents gave me. It had bounced. The payment was rejected and Emma's treatment was being put on hold again. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I called my parents immediately, my fingers fumbling with the phone. My mom answered on the third ring and said it must be a bank error. She said they would fix it tomorrow, maybe the day after. But I could hear the smugness in her voice, the barely concealed satisfaction. This was intentional. They were punishing me for not signing the house over fast enough. I drove to their house and pounded on the door until my fists hurt. My dad answered, blocking the doorway with his body. He wouldn't let me in, said I was being hysterical and dramatic as always. He said if I didn't calm down, he would call the police and report me for harassment. I told him Emma needed that treatment, that every day without it mattered. He just shrugged like we were discussing the weather and closed the door in my face. I heard the deadbolt turn, locking me out of the house I'd helped pay for. I sat in my car shaking with rage, my whole body trembling. They were using my daughter's life as a bargaining chip, playing games with a sick child's health. I called Jordan and told her what happened, trying to keep my voice steady. She said she would talk to her mom immediately. Maybe Maybe Beverly could convince my parents to stop this insanity, but I knew it wouldn't work. My parents were too far gone, hammered on their own power. They cared more about control than their granddaughter's life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those bank statements, seeing the numbers in my mind, about how they had stolen my future and were now stealing Emma's. The cruise they took cost more than Emma's entire treatment plan. By morning, I had made a decision. If they wanted to play dirty, I would too. I started by calling every relative who had been at that family meeting. I kept my voice concerned, not angry. I didn't accuse my parents of anything directly. I just said I was worried about them. I mentioned how they seemed to be having money troubles despite all the help I gave them. I suggested maybe they had a gambling problem and needed an intervention. After all, I'd seen them at the casino so often. The rumor mill started churning immediately. My Aunt Teresa called my Aunt Beverly within an hour. Beverly mentioned finding some old financial documents that concerned her. Soon half the family was talking about my parents' possible gambling addiction. It wasn't exactly what I had revealed at the meeting, but it was close enough to make people think. My parents tried to do damage control, but the seed was planted. Once doubt creeps in, it's hard to stop. Then I took it a step further. I called the casino where I had photographed them. I said I was worried about my elderly parents' gambling problem. I asked if there was any way to check how much they had spent there. The casino couldn't give me specifics due to privacy laws, but they confirmed my parents were regular customers. Very regular. The woman on the phone even sounded concerned. I made sure to have this conversation while my cousin Mason was visiting to check on Emma. He overheard everything from the kitchen. Within 2 days, the family narrative had shifted dramatically. Now instead of me being crazy and ungrateful, people were worried about my parents gambling. My mom called me screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She said I was ruining their reputation with vicious lies. She threatened to tell Emma everything immediately, to poison my daughter against me. I recorded the call on my laptop. Then I played it for Jordan, who played it for her mom. Beverly finally started to see the truth. The mask was slipping. But my parents weren't done. They showed up at Emma's school the next day and tried to check her out early. They told the office they were taking her to a doctor's appointment I had forgotten about. Luckily, the school had protocols and called me first. I rushed over, breaking several traffic laws, and found them in the principal's office, spinning some story about being concerned grandparents who just wanted to help. I had to show the principal legal documents proving I had sole custody. My parents left, but not before my mom whispered that this wasn't over. Her breath smelled like wine at 10 in the morning. That night, someone called child services and reported me for medical neglect. I knew it was them before the social worker even explained why she was there. The social worker showed up the next morning with a clipboard and a serious expression. I had to show her all of Emma's medical records, every appointment, every prescription, explain why some treatments had been delayed. I couldn't tell her about the extortion, but I mentioned financial difficulties and family problems. She seemed satisfied, but said she would need to follow up. Another problem to add to my growing list. Another way for them to hurt us. Jordan called with an update while the social worker was still there. Her mom, Beverly, had confronted my parents about the old bank statements. They had tried to lie at first, then changed their story multiple times, but Beverly had the proof right there in black and white. She told them she knew about the settlement money. My parents had broken down and admitted to spending it, but claimed they had needed it for bills and medical expenses. Beverly didn't buy it. She knew they'd been healthy back then. She was finally starting to see who they really were beneath a loving parent act. The next day, I got an unexpected call that made my stomach drop. It was from my old cleaning company. They said they had received multiple complaints about me from a client. The client claimed I had stolen from their offices, expensive equipment missing after my shifts. I knew immediately my parents were behind it. They were trying to destroy any chance I had of working. The company said they had to let me go pending investigation. Even though there was no proof, they couldn't risk keeping me on. Company policy. I was unemployed again. I was running out of options fast. No job, about to lose my house, and Emma's treatment on hold. I decided to take a risk. I posted in a local community Facebook group that night. I didn't name my parents, but I told my story. Single mom, sick kid, being extorted by family members who had already stolen from me once. I asked if anyone knew resources that could help. The post went viral in our small town within hours. Hundreds of comments poured in, some offering help, others sharing similar stories of family betrayal. My parents saw the post within hours. They were furious. My dad showed up at my house at 11 p.m. demanding I take it down. I refused to open the door. He said I was embarrassing the family, airing dirty laundry in public. I said they were unaliving their granddaughter. He actually laughed, the sound carrying through the door. He said Emma was fine, just a little sick, that I was being dramatic as always. That's when I realized they didn't even care if she died. They only cared about their image and control. They had never loved us. I recorded him saying all of this through the door. Then I updated my Facebook post with the audio. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. People were outraged. Some recognized my parents from the description. Others started putting pieces together from their own interactions. My parents' carefully crafted reputation started crumbling, but they still had one more card to play. The next morning, Emma woke up with a fever of 103. She was getting worse without treatment, her little body unable to fight anymore. I rushed her to the hospital, carrying her because she was too weak to walk. While I was filling out paperwork with shaking hands, my parents arrived. They had brought several family members with them as witnesses. They loudly told everyone in the waiting room that I was refusing their help, that they had offered to pay for everything, but I was too proud and spiteful. My uncle Kenneth backed them up. He said he had witnessed me turning down their generous offer. The other patients stared at me with judgment. I was too exhausted to fight. I just focused on Emma, holding her hand while she lay on the hospital bed. The doctor said she needed immediate treatment or things would get critical. Her numbers were dropping fast. I begged the billing department for help, willing to sign anything. That's when a stranger approached me. She said she had seen my Facebook post. She worked for a local charity that helped families with medical bills. She said they could cover Emma's treatment while we sorted everything out. I broke down crying right there in the hospital, unable to stop the tears. My parents tried to intervene. They told the charity worker I was lying, that I was mentally unstable, but she had already done her research. She knew about my job loss, the investigation, everything. She also mentioned that several people had come forward with stories about my parents. Apparently, they had a reputation for taking advantage of people, small loans never repaid, and sob stories that didn't add up. The charity approved Emma's treatment that day. The relief was overwhelming. Emma started getting better immediately. The right medications made such a difference. Her color improved within hours. But my parents weren't finished. They started calling relatives and telling them I had publicly humiliated them. They said I was accepting charity instead of family help out of spite. Some relatives relatives believed them. Others were starting to question their story. The family was dividing into camps, and the holiday season was approaching. Jordan's mom, Beverly, did something unexpected. She called a family meeting of her own. She said she had important information to share about the family's future. My parents tried to refuse, but Beverly insisted. She said if they didn't come, she would share the information anyway. They had no choice but to attend. I was invited too, but I was scared. Last time hadn't gone well. My hands shook just thinking about it. Jordan convinced me to go. She said her mom had been doing her own investigation for weeks. She had found more than just bank statements. So I went, bringing Emma with me. She was still weak but stable. I wanted the family to see what their indifference had caused. The meeting was at Beverly's house. Most of the family showed up, curious about what was going on. The tension in the room was thick. Beverly started by showing the bank statements on a projector she'd set up. She explained about the settlement money, going through each transaction methodically. Then she dropped a bomb. She had found emails, old emails between my parents from right after the settlement. They were planning how to spend the money, planning vacations and shopping trips, joking about hitting the jackpot, all while their teenage daughter was dealing with trauma. One email from my mom said I was young and would get over it. The room was silent. My parents tried to leave, but Beverly wasn't done. She had also found records of their gambling losses, years of losses, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past decade, money that came from me, money that should have gone to Emma. She had contacted the casino and gotten printouts of their loyalty program status. They were VIP members with comped rooms and free meals. Then Beverly showed everyone my Facebook post and the community response. She read comments from people my parents had borrowed money from and never repaid, stories of their manipulation and lies going back years. She said she was ashamed she hadn't seen it sooner. She apologized to me in front of everyone. She said the family had failed me and Emma. Her voice broke as she spoke. My parents tried to defend themselves, but the evidence was overwhelming. My dad blamed my mom for the gambling. My mom blamed him for the lies. They turned on each other right there in front of everyone. Years of secrets spilled out. How they had been broke before the settlement. How they had seen it as their chance to live the life they wanted. How they justified it by saying I was young and would be fine. My mom admitted she never thought I'd amount to anything anyway. My cousin Lisa started crying. She said she had suspected something was wrong but didn't want to believe it. My uncle Russell walked over to my parents and told them they were disgusting. One by one, family members turned their backs on them. The truth was finally out and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. But my parents still tried one last manipulation. My mom looked at Emma and said she was sorry she was sick. Then she looked at me and said, if I had just been a better daughter, none of this would have happened. She said I had forced them to take extreme measures by being selfish. She actually tried to blame me for their crimes. That's when Emma spoke up. My quiet, sick little girl looked at her grandmother and said she was mean. She said I was the best mom in the world and worked hard every day. She said she didn't want to see them anymore. Her voice was small but clear. The room erupted. Family members started yelling at my parents, calling them monsters, saying they were dead to the family. My parents finally realized they had lost. They left Beverly's house to a chorus of condemnation, but I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. They had lost their income source and their reputation. They would want revenge. They always had to have the last word. I was right. The next day, they filed a complaint with the nursing board. They claimed I had mental health issues that made me unfit to practice. They submitted statements saying I had threatened them and shown signs of instability. It was their final attempt to destroy my career, but this time I was ready. I had recordings, witnesses, and a charity that was willing to vouch for me. I had learned to document everything. The investigation was tough, but Jordan and Beverly testified on my behalf. The charity worker provided documentation of my parents' attempted interference with Emma's treatment. Even some of my other relatives wrote letters supporting me. The nursing board found no evidence of wrongdoing. My license was cleared and I could return to work. My supervisor apologized and offered me my job back immediately with a small raise for the trouble. But the damage to my parents was permanent and swift. Word had spread through our small town like wildfire. Their friends stopped calling. Their church asked them to leave after learning about the theft. The casino banned them after learning about the situation with Emma. They became pariahs overnight, all their own doing. They tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. They had nothing left to threaten me with. Emma continued her treatment without interruption. The charity covered everything while I got back on my feet. Family members who had stood by started helping too. Beverly gave me money she said my parents had borrowed from her years ago. Lisa offered to babysit so I could work extra shifts. Jordan helped me find a small apartment we could afford. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and no one could take it away. The house situation was complicated since I had signed it over under duress, but Beverly's husband Walter was a retired real estate agent. He found errors in the paperwork my parents had prepared. They hadn't filed it properly in their rush to take control. The transfer wasn't valid. I still owned my home. When my parents found out, they threatened to sue. But what lawyer would take their case? They had no money left and no credibility. The threat was empty. 3 months later, Emma was in remission. The doctor said she had responded well to consistent treatment. We celebrated with a small party at our house. The family members who had supported us came. Even some people from the Facebook group who had become friends. It was the first time in years I felt like we had a real support system. My parents weren't invited. I heard they had moved to a small apartment across town. They were working minimum wage jobs and barely scraping by. Exactly what they had put me through for years. Sometimes karma does come around. They tried to contact Emma on her birthday, sent a card with money in it. I gave Emma the choice. She threw it in the trash without opening it. She said people who hurt others don't deserve forgiveness. Smart kid. Probably got that from dealing with so much so young, but she was healing. We both were. The extended family basically excommunicated my parents after everything came out. They weren't welcome at holidays or family events. A few relatives felt bad for them, but most agreed they had brought it on themselves. The family rallied around Emma and me instead, offering help and support we should have had all along. It took almost losing everything to gain what we really needed, a family that actually cared about us. I sometimes wonder if my parents regret what they did, if they ever think about how different things could have been. But then I remember their cold faces that day they threatened me, the satisfaction in their eyes when they thought they had me trapped. No, they only regret getting caught. They regret losing their cash cow and their reputation. They don't regret hurting their daughter and granddaughter. People like that never do, but we survived them. Emma got healthy. I got my career back. We kept our home, and we learned who really cared about us. The price was high, but the freedom was worth it. No more threats, no more manipulation, no more giving away money we desperately needed. Just Emma and me, building our life without the weight of their greed dragging us down. We were finally free. 6 months passed, and things were finally stable. Emma was doing great with her treatments and even started playing soccer again. again. I was back at work full-time and had even picked up some overtime shifts. We were catching up on bills and I could actually buy groceries without checking my bank balance first. Then my parents tried one more thing. I got a letter from a lawyer saying my parents were contesting the house paperwork. They claimed I had verbally agreed to give them the house and they wanted me to honor that agreement. The letter was from some cheap lawyer who probably took their case for a small retainer. I wasn't even worried. I had Beverly's husband Walter on my side and he knew property law inside and out. He said their case was garbage and would get thrown out immediately. But my parents were desperate. They started showing up places. First at the grocery store where they cornered me by the produce section. My mom started crying about how they were struggling. My dad said I had ruined their lives over a misunderstanding. I just walked away. They followed me through the store until security made them leave. Then they showed up at Emma's school again. This time the principal called the police. They were given a warning about trespassing. Jordan called me one afternoon with news. She had been at the bank and overheard something interesting. My parents were trying to get a loan using my house as collateral. They were telling the bank they had ownership papers. The bank clerk shut them down when they couldn't produce proper documentation, but it showed they were getting desperate. They were running out of money and options. I decided to be proactive this time. I went to the police station and filed a report about the harassment. The officer said without threats of violence there wasn't much they could do, but he suggested I document everything and consider a restraining order if it escalated. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere. Every time I saw them, every attempt at contact, everything went in that notebook with dates and times. The family was still divided about my parents. My Aunt Teresa felt bad for them despite everything. She said they were old and had made mistakes. She tried to convince me to help them a little. I reminded her about Emma in the hospital, about the bounced check, about years of extortion. She stopped asking after that, but I knew she was probably giving them money on the side. That was her choice. My parents' lawyer sent another letter. This time they were claiming emotional distress. They said I had turned the family against them and ruined their reputation. They wanted damages. Walter laughed when he read it. He said it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen. He wrote a response basically telling them to stop wasting everyone's time. He also mentioned we had documentation of their extortion and theft. The letters stopped after that, but my parents found other ways to bother us. They started a rumor that I was keeping Emma from them out of spite. They told anyone who would listen that they just wanted to see their granddaughter. Some people who didn't know the whole story believed them. I started getting messages on Facebook from strangers saying I should forgive my parents. That family was important. That holding grudges was unhealthy. I blocked them all. Emma asked about her grandparents one day. She wanted to know why they were so mean. I kept it simple. I told her sometimes people care more about money than family. Sometimes people make bad choices and hurt others. She nodded like she understood. Then she asked if they would ever be nice. I told her I didn't think so. She seemed okay with that answer. Kids are resilient. My parents tried going through other relatives next. They convinced my Uncle Kenneth to call me. He said they were sorry and wanted to make amends. He said they admitted they were wrong. I asked if they were willing to return the money they stole. He got quiet. Then he said that was in the past and we should move forward. I hung up. They weren't sorry. They were broke. Jordan's mom, Beverly, had become like a real mother to me. She invited us over for dinner every Sunday. She helped with Emma when I had to work late. She even came to Emma's school events. One day she told me she had written my parents out of her will. She said after what they did, they were dead to her. She was leaving everything to her kids and grandkids, including Emma and me in that group. I cried when she told me that. The harassment continued in small ways. Hang-up calls from unknown numbers. My parents sitting in their car outside my work, following me to the grocery store but staying just far enough away. They were trying to intimidate me without technically doing anything illegal. I kept documenting everything. My notebook was getting full. The police said it still wasn't enough for a restraining order. They needed proof of threats. Then they made a mistake. My mom left a voicemail one night after drinking too much. She said I would regret ruining their lives. She said karma would get me. She said she hoped Emma got sick again so I would know how it felt to suffer. She actually said she hoped my daughter would suffer. I saved that voicemail immediately, made multiple copies. That was the threat I needed. The restraining order was approved within a week. My parents were ordered to stay 500 feet away from Emma and me. No contact of any kind. No third-party contact either. If they violated it, they would be arrested. The judge seemed disgusted when he heard the voicemail. He said threatening a child was unconscionable. My parents didn't even show up to contest it. They knew they had messed up. With the restraining order in place, life got peaceful. No more harassment, no more showing up at random places, no more letters from lawyers. They were legally required to leave us alone. Emma noticed the difference immediately. She said it felt safer now. She was right. We could go places without looking over our shoulders. We could relax in our own home without worrying about surprise visits. I heard updates about my parents through the family grapevine. They were working at a fast food place, living in a studio apartment on the bad side of town. Their car had been repossessed. They were experiencing exactly what they had put me through for years. The difference was I had been young with a sick child. They were just facing the consequences of their own greed. I didn't feel sorry for them. Emma's health continued to improve. She was gaining weight and had energy again. Her doctors were amazed at her progress. She was even able to go back to school full-time. Her grades were good and she made new friends. She joined the art club and discovered she loved painting. Watching her be a normal kid again was everything. That's all I had wanted, just for her to be healthy and happy. The charity that had helped us invited me to speak at their fundraiser. I was nervous but agreed. I told our story to a room full of donors, about how their help had literally saved my daughter's life, about how family had failed us but strangers had stepped up. Several people cried during my speech. They raised more money that night than any previous year. The director said my story had inspired people to give. My nursing career was going better than ever. My supervisor recommended me for a promotion to charge nurse. It came with better hours and more money. I could finally stop working overtime just to survive. I could be home for dinner with Emma, help with homework, watch movies together, normal mom stuff that I had missed for so long. We were building the life we deserved. Beverly threw Emma a huge birthday party that year. The whole family came except my parents, obviously. Emma was the center of attention and loved every minute. She got presents and played games and ate too much cake. She told me it was the best birthday ever. Watching her laugh with her cousins, I realized this was the family we had needed all along, the people who actually loved us. I ran into my dad at the pharmacy a few months later. He looked terrible, thin and gray and tired. He started to approach me but saw my hand go to my phone. He remembered the restraining order. He just stood there looking pathetic. For a second I almost felt bad. Then I remembered Emma in the hospital, the bounced check, the threats, the voicemail wishing she would get sick again. I walked past him without a word. My mom tried one last manipulation. She sent a letter to Emma's school saying she was concerned about her granddaughter's welfare welfare. She claimed I was an unfit mother who had kept Emma from necessary medical care. The school had to investigate, but they had all of Emma's medical records. They could see she was healthy and thriving. The principal called me personally to apologize for the inconvenience. He said they had to follow up on all concerns, but he could see it was baseless. That letter violated the restraining order since it was third-party contact about us. I filed a police report immediately. My parents were arrested at their apartment. My mom cried and said she just missed her granddaughter. My dad blamed her for sending the letter. They turned on each other in front of the cops. Both got charged with violating the order. They spent a night in jail and got probation. One more violation and they would do real time. After that arrest, they finally stopped completely. Maybe reality had finally sunk in. Maybe they realized I wasn't the weak teenage girl they had controlled for so long. Maybe they were just too tired to keep fighting. Whatever the reason, we didn't hear from them again. The silence was beautiful. Emma and I could finally just live our lives without fear or drama. The extended family settled into a new normal. My parents weren't mentioned at gatherings. It was like they had never existed. A few relatives still had contact with them but kept it separate. Nobody pressured me to forgive them anymore. They had seen what my parents were capable of. They understood why reconciliation was impossible. Some things can't be fixed with an apology. Emma asked me once if I was sad about my parents. I told her the truth. I was sad about the parents I wished I had. The ones who would have protected me and loved Emma, but I wasn't sad about losing the parents I actually had. They had been hurting us for years. Sometimes you have to let go of toxic people even if they're family. She understood in her 8-year-old way. We kept the house and made it truly ours. Painted Emma's room purple because that was her favorite color. Put up pictures of our real family. The people who had stood by us. Beverly and Jordan and Lisa and everyone who had helped. That was our family now. The people who showed up when things got hard. Who believed us when the truth was ugly. Who helped without expecting anything back. I sometimes think about that teacher who started everything. Wonder if he ever thinks about the damage he caused. But mostly I don't. He's not worth the mental energy. My parents though, they had a choice. They could have used that money to help me heal. To get me therapy and support. Instead they used it for themselves, then spent years punishing me for their crime. That's harder to let go. But we survived it all. Emma was healthy. I had a good job. We had a home and a real family. The price had been high, but we had won in the end. My parents were living the life they had forced on me while we were thriving. There's some justice in that. They had played stupid games and won stupid prizes, as Reddit likes to say. Meanwhile, Emma and I had won our freedom. Looking back now, I'm grateful in a weird way. If my parents hadn't pushed so hard, I might have spent my whole life under their control, giving them money while Emma and I struggled, believing I owed them for their silence. Their greed had freed us in the end. They had shown me who they really were and given me the strength to fight back. Now Emma and I were free to build our life without them. That's really the end of the story. No dramatic final confrontation. No tearful reconciliation. Just life going on without them in it. Emma healthy and happy. Me working a job I loved. A family that actually cared about us. And 2 people who had learned they were never welcome in our lives again. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And we were living very well indeed.